Welcome to the Training Portal podcast, where we delve into the heart of growth and transformation, both personal and professional. I'm your host, Melissa Mostert, and every fortnight I'll be sharing a meaningful conversation over coffee with industry leaders, innovators, and changemakers who are helping to shape the future of South Africa. In each episode, we'll uncover stories of passion and impact, stories that inspire and challenge us to think differently about development, innovation, and community upliftment. Whether you're dedicated to education, seeking personal growth, or driven by a desire to make a difference, this podcast is your companion on that journey to continuous development. The Training Portal podcast is your source of knowledge and insight, guiding you through the ever-evolving landscape of development in South Africa. On today's episode of the Training Portal podcast, we're excited to welcome Murray Pienaar and Annelie Terheyden from Corporate Strategy Group. Murray is the managing director and founder of the business with an honors degree in industrial relations and 25 years of experience in business development and client relations. Annelie is the head of transformation risk management and finance and is a qualified chartered accountant who specializes in corporate governance and compliance management and transformation. Corporate Strategy Group specializes in the interesting and challenging field of statutory compliance to the Skills Development Act, as well as Employment Equity Act, which are often misunderstood and neglected by businesses, which can often result in devastating consequences. Several important amendments have been implemented or are busy being implemented by the government in this field, and we are keen to get their expert insights into the latest happenings. Please join me in welcoming Murray and Annelie to the podcast.
So please join me in welcoming Murray and Annelie to the podcast. Thank you guys so much for making the time.
Opportunity.
Awesome. So I understand that CSG is an established relationship or has an established relationship with Training Portal that goes back for many, many years. How and why did this relationship form?
The relationship formed 10 years ago, approximately 10 years ago, with Dani from Training Portal. He was then still involved in with Siandisa Trust. And he was, at that stage, he was still involved in the B-BBEE consulting space. And one of my regional manager in Gauteng met him at a mutual client then of Siandisa Trust. And then Dani and the Pachani group and also Siandisa approached us to ask us if we will be willing to assist their clients with their statutory compliance, because at that stage, they didn't have a established partner to help them with their training reporting, being their workplace skills plans and also their employment equity reporting. So that's how the relationship was formed. And out of that, obviously a few years later, Training Portal was established. And yes, and then it just went further and further. Then Annelie and her team started engaging a lot with Training Portal with regards to reporting of training and also the link between the training that Training Portal provides to their clients and us reporting that training. And in order to do the whole service, which is very important for the BEE space, which the Siandisa Trust and also Fachani, it's very important to them and their clients. So yeah, we've come a long way. And I think it's been a very nice learning experience and a growth experience to all of us. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is we're providing an excellent service, all the parties involved, to our clients and help them towards their path of excellence.
Wow, that is very inspiring. Yeah. How long has CSG been around? I know you said the relationship with Training Portal is 10 years old.
Yeah, the CSG, I started the company literally in 2000.
Okay.
So CSG has been basically rendering services in some other way, everything with regards to human capital. Mm-hmm. Later, also focusing on training and the BEE components and statutory compliance. but we've been around for literally 24 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's a long time for a company to be around.
And the service has actually evolved with regards to the needs of the clients. And then what I did is I approached specific partners, strategic partners, which are specialists in their fields, to assist us, because it's very competitive out there, and you must surround yourself with the best associates.
Absolutely.
So that's how we're building the company and assisting other companies also to render that service with professional partners and specialists in their field.
So you say you formed CSG in the year 2000, but what is your background and what exactly is your role today in CSG?
Yeah, my background is I actually, I did industrial psychology at Stellenbosch University. Then I did an honors in labor law. And the company was, when I started the company, we were labor law specialists and more in HR consulting, focusing on labor. But as time went by, we basically saw that, you know, we must expand our services to be big, to stay relevant in the market.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so if I must look back, that was the right thing to do because we grew with the market. And I employed and brought in specialists in their field, like Annelie and her team is focusing on the statutory compliance. I would say my role at the moment is basically I'm the managing director and I'm focusing on new business development and basically to maintain the established clients, basically client maintenance and make sure that, you know, we render the best service at all times. So that's basically my role. Yeah.
So you mentioned Dani earlier, and for those of you listening, Dani is one of our managers at Training Portal. And Dani has actually mentioned to me before that during his time as a BEE consultant, he encountered many instances where companies did not submit their WSPs and then have to call CSG to assist them. Tell me, why do you think this is the case?
Well, the WSP is the workplace skills plan that Marie referred to earlier. And these workplace skills plans are very important component. It's a prerequisite for the verification of the skills element. So, you know, your verification analyst is going to require 4 prerequisite items.
Okay.
Otherwise, they won't even look at that element. The first one is a proof of registration at a relevant CETA and the submission of the workplace skills plan. Then they also want to see that that workplace skills plan was approved. And depending on the timing of the verification, it could be that the approval hasn't been done yet. Then they're going to require the prior or a affidavit from the training manager or the skills development facilitator that it was in actual fact submitted. Then they would want to see the actual work-based skills plan and together with that the ATR, which is the actual training report. And then they would want to see that the company or the measured entity did some training or the skills that they're training is aligned with the CETA's priority skills plan. So without that, doesn't matter how much you've spent, you don't have that. You know, they do not even start verifying your skills spent. So that could be detrimental because I can imagine you lose those points.
Yes.
And if your skills development spend drops below 40% because skills development is a priority element, then you could lose a level, which is a very
disastrous thing to come through us from.
Yeah, it's very bad.
So what type of companies need to complete the WSPs?
Well, definitely if you're BE sensitive, if you have made a considered effort for skills development, and then just in general, you know, companies, it's not a legislated requirement, but you get a percentage of your skills levies. You get that back. So, but for BEE, definitely a very important part.
Okay. And when must companies complete and submit these WSPs?
So it depends on the different sectors. Okay, so the sectors are aligned with industries and sectors, depending on which sector industry you're involved with. You get registered with that sector. Some sectors open their submission platforms November, December, some sectors a bit later, February, and then you have to submit the information in the required format by the 30th of April.
Okay.
Certain sectors allow for extension with valid reasons, then you get another month. But as soon as the submission platform closes, there's no additional.
You can't go and try it again.
No.
So it's like, and you've missed out, then you've missed out.
Yeah, well, you've missed out, and then you have to wait until the next year. So
Okay.
you're going to miss out on the opportunity to have what's required for your.
And that can be quite detrimental.
Very detrimental. Specifically, if companies spend between 3% and 6% on of their payroll, total payroll on skills development in order to get the relevant points for their BE level. So yes, it's a very important part of your BE planning.
So tell me, are there other statutory requirements or compliance risks that could affect a company's overall BEE level when it does go through to verification?
Yes, another consideration would be your employment equity reports, because that's also an aspect that your verification analyst requires. So it's part of the management control element. And they would request, either you're a non-designated employer, which means you have a workforce component of less than 50 employees, and your turnover is not above the threshold that the Act requires. But if you are a designated employer, you have 50 or more employees, or your turnover threshold exceeds the threshold, then you have to register and you have to comply by submitting EA2 and EA4. And you do that now. At the beginning of September, platform opens and the 15th of January closes. And again, then it's done. You have to have it in. And but the Employment Equity Act is a very punitive act. It's not all about BE. It's, if you don't comply, you get penalized severely. If you're a designated employer and you do not comply with the requirements of the Act.
And you guys do assist other companies with employment equity?
Absolutely. It's a very big part of your workforce statutory compliance. And like I said, you could be penalized. The minimum is 1.5 million.
Oh, wow.
It just gets more. So it just goes up. So that's a nasty penalty to hit the bottom line.
I can imagine.
So tell me, what companies need to comply with the Employment Equity Act, and what do they need to do in order to avoid penalties?
So companies with a workforce of 50 or more employees, they have to register as designated employers. And then if you have less employees, below 50, but your turnover exceeds the threshold set in the Employment Equity Act, then you also have to register and comply with Chapter 3 of the Act. Okay. In the agri sector, the threshold's very low. It's only 6 million. Construction is a bit more, 15 million. And then in wholesale and retail, it's quite a bit more, 75 million.
Wow.
And what you need to do, it's very onerous, very specific. So if the inspector from the department knocks on your door, they would want to see, first of all, that there's a senior person appointed as the employment equity manager, formally setting out the roles and responsibilities of the position, that you have a representative employment equity committee. That means all the different gender and race groups are represented, as well as the different occupational levels that you have in the company. And this employment equity committee will meet at least every quarter. Formal agenda, minutes, very specific items that they address.
Okay.
Sometimes the companies also use the E-committee as the training committee, because it links. Then we have the work that this committee do is it assists the management with the analysis. So the Section 19 analysis is also a requirement that gets documented in a specific form, it's the EA12. And so they, based on the categories that the department prescribes, the barriers gets identified. It could be policies, practices, it could be the accommodation of the company. And it's then the task of management to develop affirmative action measures that address these barriers. And a lot of the time, training is a very valuable tool for management to use as a measure. So if a company cannot produce the EA12 that's consulted with the committee, it's a 1.5 million penalty.
Wow.
Yeah. But now we get to the more onerous ones, or the punitive sections, which is your Section 20, your EE plan, must be designed and implemented based on that analysis. So in your analysis, you'd look at your workforce and see which groups are underrepresented in the different occupational levels. And in your plan, you then set targets and goals for these groups to be, the underrepresentation to be corrected. And you indicate what strategies are you going to follow, recruit or promote after you've done the training, etc. So if you don't have a plan, again in a specific format, the EA13 format, then it is 1% of turnover.
That can be quite a lot.
Yeah, that's quite a lot, but that's for the first strike. For the second strike, if you haven't done it correctly again, could be 2% of turnover.
So it's just going to keep increasing.
Increasing, yeah. And then your reports that gets done around about this time of the year, 1st of September, the department's platform opens, and the 15th of January next year it closes. And you need to have your EA2 and EA4 reports submitted. And if you haven't done that and you are supposed to, then again, 1%, 2% of turnover. Okay. So so that's very important to get it right, to know when you have to comply, you have to register, and to get it right. Yeah, so this year specifically, it's important to know that although there's an amendment act in the wings, the current or the old Employment Equity Act still stands, and everyone that's designated employer in terms of that act has to report for the 2024 reporting season.
Speaking of the change in legislation, and we did mention briefly the amendments of the Employment Equity Act. Tell me, what are the most important things and changes that is being brought about by this act, and how can companies address them?
There's a few items. The first of all is that the department wants to simplify it, because, like I said, it's quite an onerous act. So they said 50 and more employees, then you need to comply with all the Chapter 3 requirements. All companies has to comply with Chapter 2, which is all about policies and practices, etc. Okay, so the 50 plus workforce companies then has to do, the manager, the committee, the plans, the analysis, the reporting, that kind of thing. And because of the fact that over the past few years, the department hasn't seen enough changes of underrepresented groups filtering into companies' management structures, they have now brought in sector targets. Okay, so specific target set for top senior professional, which is your mid-management, and your junior management, which is your skilled level, that they want to see certain underrepresented groups and genders to be promoted and appointed in those positions. But in order to get that right, the sector targets are being discussed and fine-tuned in the form of regulations. The regulations must get promulgated together with the Amendment Act, and then it will be sort of law.
Okay.
But until that happens, the old law still stands. But another big change is currently your Employment Equity Act, the employer can decide 1 year works for me.
2 years work, anything 1 to 5 years. You can have your own the period you decide on. The Amendment Act says you've got 5 years, and your EE goal, your final year, the goal profile must be the same as your sector profile or more. And then you look at the economically active population either nationally or provincially. And there's also prescription around that. When you can go for national, when can you go for provincial? So that becomes tough because your end goal sort of you have a certain profile which is not dependent on how many people are going to retire or resign or whatever. You need to work towards that. And there's a lot of strategies that an employer can sort
implement
to get that done. Again, pipeline management, train certain people to be in a certain position over 5 years. Very important is that you need to communicate with your workforce that the Employment Equity Act is not now overriding basic conditions. You are not allowed to, as an employer, to terminate someone's employment because of employment equity requirements. You are not allowed to disregard certain people's qualifications and experience because they're not the right target designated group. So it's very fine line, and there are certain what they call justifiable reasons that you can use to indicate why you haven't reached your targets and the end goal. But it's very important that you evidence that to the department. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of work for HRs.
I can imagine.
This process with regards to people.
And tell me, if companies are interested in getting assistance in their WSPs or even their employment equity, can they get in contact with your group?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
That's why we are here.
Definitely.
Well, I'll then make sure that all your details are going to be in the bio of this podcast.
Great, thank you.
So, and any extra documentation you might have that you want listeners to have a look at, we'll provide links and everything to that.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks for the opportunity to
Thank
talk
you
about
guys
this.
so much for being here and for taking the time for being
Thank
here.
you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
We said in the beginning, but I'm just saying at the end as well. Thank you very much.
Well, we love hearing from other perspectives and everything. So it's very interesting. I mean, it's not something that I'm very well versed in, but it's interesting to hear how it is developing in South Africa and the challenges it's going to.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
it's interesting, doable challenges. That sounds good, eh?
It does.
Yeah.
Interesting but doable.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is doable, but you must know what you are doing.
But I mean, a lot of companies don't. So having companies like CSG available is I think very beneficial to, especially companies who don't even know where to begin.
You must understand companies focus on what makes money for them. They won't focus on statutory stuff. That is why you must use a specialist.
Exactly. Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next time on the Training Portal podcast.
Engineers are the most essential people in our economies. They create 7 out of 10 jobs. They represent 90% of global businesses.
Oh, wow.
And contribute 40% towards GDP in emerging economies. So without a doubt, they are the most essential people to our society. But every year, they are underfunded by $5 trillion.